fancy overlay graphics, but you know what? I am here, and I'm here from New York City. Normally, I'm coming to you from the home studio back in Texas, but Cloud Talk Live is, we're doing the summer road trip, and we are on the road. And I'm here to work with some partners in New York. But for right now, guys, it's Cloud Talk Live. Hey, if you want to get a hold of us, you always can do that by sending an email over to solve@rackspace.com. Also, this conversation that we're having today is meant to be just that, a conversation, which means I would love for you to introduce yourself. Tell me who you are. Tell me where you are. Would love to be able to interact with you. I've got a great guest coming up here shortly. His name is Simon Bennett. Normally, I'd have a fancy graphic scrolling right there. There's only so much gear you can carry with you when you're traveling, so it's not there. But Simon will be along shortly. We're going to do all the things we normally do. Once we're finished with Simon, we're going to go into the This Week in Cloud. I'll tell you what's the news from the cloud. We'll talk about some updates from the cloud providers as well. And then lastly, we don't sell anything here at Rackspace Solve, except for the fact that I'd love for you to come work with us. And so I've got a job of the day that I'll share with you a little bit later. Hey, and we've got our first person who's here, and he is excited. It's Navdeep. Navdeep, where in the world are you? I could make some guesses, but I'd love for you to tell me where in the world you are. And be like Sandeep. Hey, Sean's here from San Antonio. And look what producer Daniel's doing. He's getting all kinds of fancy. Good morning, Sean. Glad to see you. Hope all is well. And I hope it cools off in San Antonio a little bit. Well, hey, with that, let's go ahead and get into this week's conversation. We're talking about all things, of course, cloud. This is the summer road trip. So, Daniel, let's roll the fancy graphics. That's right. Welcome to London. And with the trip to London, would be remiss if we didn't get a chance to talk to Mr. Simon Bennett. Simon Bennett is the CTO of our EMEA region. And he has spent a huge amount of time not only working in cloud transformation, but with a deep understanding of what's happening inside public sector. Now, let's bring on Simon up on the stage. Why don't we? Simon, welcome to Cloud Talk Live.
Good morning, Jeff. Thank you very much. And welcome to all who've joined in.
Welcome indeed. We've got folks from San Antonio. We've got folks from Navdeep looks like he is in Canada. And I'm sure others will be introducing themselves shortly. Be like Sean, be like Navdeep, and introduce yourself. So Simon, you've been working inside of IT for just a little while now, I understand it.
I've done a few years now, Jeff. Yeah, must admit that. I think too many to count, to be honest. I ran out of fingers and toes. So it's more than 20.
Well, you and I did a podcast, my gosh, it's probably been about a year ago now. And we talked about all of the different, kind of phases of transformation that you've been a part of, starting even inside of that mainframe into client server, many years of client server. And then, Mexico's here. And then, of course, now into the cloud business. And cloud brings a huge amount of opportunity for transformation. But what we want to talk about today more specifically is some of those aspects of cloud transformation as it relates to public sector. Now, Simon, your experience in public sector is largely in and around the UK. Are there uniquenesses or differences that you would think public sector from country to country or region to region?
No, I think in the main, it's pretty much the same. I think the only thing that governs you slightly different are the regulations associated with each country or region. But in terms of the work you generally do, it's pretty similar, just with some small differences around the margins.
Got it. Hey, we've got folks from Florida. We got folks from Mexico. India is here. Bunty, welcome. Glad that you're here. So guys, continue to introduce yourselves. We'd love to know that you're here. So the bigger differences, not necessarily from region to region, would just be what are the regulations. We know there's a lot of regulations. Now, those regulations in public sector themselves create some uniquenesses to transformation. And one of them, we were talking a little bit earlier before we went live, is the amount of technical debt that organizations inside of public sector have that tends to be a little bit more than we'd find in private sector. Why don't you unpack that a little bit for us, Simon?
Yeah, I think what often happens is that investment cases in the public sector run a project and then things go live and they sit in maybe in a data center, but they run until to a certain extent they need to be replaced rather than having a more regular refresh cycle. So then the project needs its own justification or business case to make it work. And that often slows up the cycle in public sector relative to the private sector and means maybe that the projects take on a slightly different shape.
So the technology themselves isn't necessarily different. Is they're just trying to sweat out and get as much out of that those deployments as possible. Correct?
Absolutely. If you think about it, it's the taxpayers that fund that equipment for public sector. So everyone wants to get the best value out of the equipment they've purchased in the past.
That's right. And that's an interesting point as well. When we think about cloud transformation, a lot of it is driven from, hey, can we make sure that we've gotten everything we can out of the old system? But the second piece to think about then is this move to the cloud going to save us some funds, some money, or is it going to cost us more? But then that third piece, and that's where it really can get challenging, is will this optimize our environment? So can we use these new environments inside of this transformed cloud to actually function better? Meaning, are we going to get more value out of it? And that becomes a hard part to sell in the business case, whether you're in private sector or even public sector.
It certainly does. And I think what most public sector organizations now realize is the value of data. I think maybe they've just run line of business applications in the past, but they've collected, gigabytes or terabytes or petabytes of data that maybe hasn't been exploited to help them deliver better public services. I think what people are realizing now is that data has an immense value and can deliver ultimately better services to the public. So it's not just about moving things at all or removing the technical debt. It's actually making better use of assets they've already got to deliver much better services.
So that's a totally different way to go about the business case for public sector transformation. What are some of the reasons that public sector, business cases for transformation tend to fail?
I think often, and it's no fault of the individuals involved, is maybe the approach to start with is I've got technical debt which I need to solve, which could be
Yeah.
things are just out of date. So the business case might be to upgrade a whole bunch of Linux or Windows servers or update out of date databases, rather than look at it in terms of what new services can I deliver, what other benefit can I achieve. That could be reducing a CO2 footprint, especially with sustainability. And with the cost of electricity now around the world, how much can I reduce my electrical consumption and reduce my bills? So all of those things come into making the business case much more complicated than simply upgrading a bunch of technology.
Yeah, because when you think about a business, people who work inside of of a business tend to, while they're in their own little departments, but they tend to have visibility and understand how the entire thing functions, operates, what the goals are, and such. But in public sector, that business is much wider. The impact is much greater, and the silos I have found personally. Maybe you can shed some light on that. The silos are a lot tighter. So it's harder to build a business case because these things tend to impact the larger organization that either they don't have visibility into, or those making the decision don't necessarily have full impact or visibility into.
I think that's absolutely right. And often the business case initially just starts with a small part of the IT department. It doesn't start
Yeah.
with the wider benefit to the department at large or the public they serve or the function they serve. And it needs to be able to broaden out, which often takes a little bit of convincing of the stakeholders, because you've got a different set of stakeholders that might evaluate that business case in the first place. And I think there's a lot of not only the technical side, but the messaging, the overall building of that case, and the stakeholder interviews you need to do to create the business case is often quite different. And everyone is very busy, and you need to persuade them of the merits of what you're doing as much as doing the work.
Yeah. Hey, you've got a fan here. Looks like David Price is excited to see you here. I also want to say hi to Zalal from Turkey. We don't often get folks from Turkey. I'm so glad that you're here today. Love that we have this global audience, especially while we're doing the summer road trip, interviewing and talking to folks all over the globe. So David Price, welcome. Glad that you are here. We also have Mexico here and such. So, well, when we think about the reasons for building a business case and ways to make that business case more successful. There is one characteristic that today is helping business cases succeed where they haven't been able to in the past. And Simon, you mentioned this to me earlier, but that's in and around sustainability. So maybe you can unpack why sustainability is helping these transformation business cases actually get approved.
Okay, so that as a subject is quite fascinating now, and especially in the UK where I'm based, a lot of the times now there are mandates to reduce the CO2 consumption, and
Yeah.
that unlocks funding. So if you can demonstrate that you are reducing your the amount of pollution, the amount of CO2 you generate in a project, it often unlocks different sources of funding, and it means that you get different stakeholders who are very interested in the project you're then going to undertake. I know, for example, within the NHS digital initiatives, there's a whole focus on how do I reduce my CO2? How do I make myself more efficient? And that whole process and the business case, but also the journey to cloud and generally being more efficient, ticks a number of boxes in terms of those sort of mandates from government at a more national level, which can be then deployed at a more local level in terms of unlocking sources of funding.
Isn't that interesting? Because we talk about how different public sector has all these different requirements for what you can do and what you can't do. But when you start ticking the box and having the requirements that says, look, these digital solutions have to be more sustainable, that actually unlocks funding that wasn't available before. In fact, maybe even forces a transformation where one wasn't going to happen before. Sustainability in cloud transformation is actually a really huge thing. And sustainability, we think about it in the context of green. It's what comes to mind. It's what we've learned. But there are actually three aspects to sustainability. One is it environmentally sustainable. The second to that is it economically sustainable. And a lot of people don't necessarily think about that, Simon. When you think about before, hardware was procured, by going through finance and getting to procured through procurement. Well, now hardware oftentimes gets acquired, or infrastructure gets acquired through a line of code, and it completely breaks down, that whole process. So talk to me a little bit about how public sector, if there's some uniquenesses there about putting the right governance in place in these transformations to ensure that these solutions are economically sustainable in the long run.
I think economics plays a massive part in it, because ultimately the number of, customers, if you will, or the public that consume that service, you can truly tie your use of resources to how many customer interactions you have. And that certainly plays a role in things like serverless computing these days, where you can absolutely tie down the service that you deliver to the cost in terms of compute, and therefore the actual pound or dollar amount you would pay for that service. So if you're then building a case on the members of the public you might serve in a government function, you can say, well, the cost to serve per customer or member of the public can actually have a pound or a dollar amount associated with it, whereas before it was just an aggregated lump in hardware or software licensing. So you're actually really tying the services that you provide to the cost you incur to provide them. And I think that really makes people look at the problem in a different way.
That's right. And that's really when I start to get really excited about transformation like this. We think about people who really open their eyes to the opportunity that exists, not just, hey, we can get some new capability, but we can reinvent the way we even approach compute altogether. And it causes public sector teams to have to rethink the way they go about their business. And even reconsider the entire business process. I love that you brought up NHS. We've done some work with NHS, and they are completely rethinking how they serve the healthcare there in the UK, and that's when technology really gets exciting. And you brought up before, and I want to dip back into the topic, data. Data has, up until this point in our evolution of technology, I call it the necessary evil. We've had to have data stores, we've had to have databases to make the application itself function. And that's totally being flipped in how we address our solutions, because that data oftentimes now we're finding has more value in some cases than the application itself, because we've had these for years, and we can get insight and understanding into our customers, into our employees in ways that we've never been able to before. So it sounds like what you just mentioned before, Simon, that public sector is no different.
It absolutely isn't. And I think, ultimately data has been collected for years and years, but no one's known what to do with it. All of a sudden, people are going, well, what can I do with that data that I've been collecting? Can I look at it in a different way? Can I analyze it? Can I use it to gather insights on services I already offer? But also, more importantly, can I get some insights to help me think about new services I don't offer because I understand more about the people I interact with? So it comes in many guises, but ultimately, that data has an immense value. Obviously, it's subject to regulation like GDPR
Mhm.
in the Europe, so we need to make sure the data is used wisely and actually undertaking in a way that doesn't, contradict local laws or regulations. But
Yeah.
even despite that, the data still has value and can be used in a number of ways to deliver that benefit and actually unlock the potential of information that we hold about services offered today and want to offer in the future.
Well, and you mentioned GDPR, and we have to use the data wisely. Now, I think one of the reasons we haven't used it as much in the past is, we haven't had the compute cycles available to really to sanitize that data, to treat that data in a way that does follow the right regulations. Well, now with compute on demand, we have the ability to go through and do that work that needs to be done so that we can use the parts of the data that we're allowed to use
Mm.
for our customers. Um, and so data has been that, again, I call it that necessary evil. A lot of people now are calling data, they call it the new oil, meaning there's value there. I don't necessarily like that expression as much. I think calling data the new oxygen is a great way, because that breathes life into the organization that we haven't been able to see before. How are you seeing data being used in public sector in ways that it's creating value? Do you have any examples that you could share?
I think first and foremost, if simple things like booking appointments with patients,
Yeah.
irrespective of what it is, or booking client sessions, if you know when people don't attend, and it could be related to weather, it could be related to demographics, it could be related to age. When you start to realise things like non-attendance is caused by, older folk don't travel in the rain and maybe miss appointments because it's raining, you could actually look at weather forecasts when you schedule appointments. So you're using data about, no shows, for example, to actually target people in a different way to improve attendance rates. So simple things like that, combining data from multiple sources and looking at the past records. What new data can I bring to bear to actually inform the way I interact? And weather is an obvious example, I think, for people attending appointments.
Simon, that's a perfect and seemingly simple example that you gave there, but it's a great example of how organizations are completely rethinking the process. And if we unpack that just a little bit farther, the goal is to make sure, if you've got these highly skilled, highly trained doctors, nurses, medical personnel who are there and ready to serve patients, the goal is to make sure that that whole day is filled with serving patients and not wasting time. So first of all, we don't want the elderly to go out in environments that could cause them more harm. And so they're, by default, maybe not going to show up on the day, but to be able to proactively rethink the scheduling process. Now they can actually create greater value, not just for the patient, but of course also for the organization. And that's what gets me excited about transformation and rethinking, not just, hey, we're getting new servers, or hey, we're going from Windows version X to Windows version Y, or VMware this to VMware that, but actually completely rethinking the way that we approach the business process itself, and then marrying the technology to that.
Yeah, absolutely, Jeff. I think, that reimagining of the data and how you can use it to better serve the end consumer is going to be a really big factor. And I think when people see the data used to their own personal benefit, they're also more inclined to actually be willing to maybe allow more to be handed over as well. And I think you
Yeah.
build up a degree of trust by using it in a good way.
That's a really good word to have used when you talk about building trust, because it can be scary to use data in new ways, and it's not just trust on the patient side, but it's trust on the organization and the
Yep.
department side, that hey, what we've done has created value. These small incremental steps, and we think about the example of looking at weather when doing scheduling. It is, I mean, it's a very safe way to approach transformation, and maybe there's something larger that they'll do sort of in the past. Now, a really interesting point that I can't see the name, it just says LinkedIn user, but talking about data and analytics in the public sector, it's important for making data driven decisions and governance, especially in a pandemic type of environment. Oh, thank you, Daniel Barat. Thank you for that. And David Price also piping in here as well. See, I once mentioned that data was the greatest asset that the NHS didn't leverage enough. Well, I'll tell you, they're doing it now. It is super impressive of what they're up to. Well, Simon, I'm so glad that you took the time out of your afternoon to be a part of it. Everyone, thank you so much for being chatty here with us as well. Simon, any parting thoughts about transformation in the public sector before we head on into our next part of the program?
I think for me, it's really that public sector often want help writing business cases. I think using external expertise, whoever does it, giving a well-rounded opinion in forming those business cases really makes public sector transformation work really well. I think working together with different organisations to build those things is an essential part, and collaboration is the massive input to start that whole journey and process.
It is. Well, Simon, thank you so much for that. Thank you for sharing with us today. Folks, if you want to get a hold of Simon, of course, you can find him on LinkedIn. He is very active over there. You can find me there as well. You may have just found us here on LinkedIn as well. So go ahead and connect with Simon, ask him any other questions. And I want to just encourage you all to keep your comments coming. I'm really thrilled that we have so many folks from all over the world here today. All right. Well, Simon, I hope you have a great rest of your afternoon. And with that, folks, we are going to move on into This Week in the Cloud. That's the part of the program where I'll share with you a couple of news articles from the world of cloud and why they're important to you. All right, so This Week in the Cloud. And our first article comes to us from about Google. Now, this is also going to be a part of what's new from the cloud providers as well. So we're going to start up with news article number 1, and that is Google has created new cloud computing region in Dallas. Now, of course, I have to mention this because I am from Texas. So the cloud, at least Google's cloud, has come to Texas. Now, this is part of a $9.5 billion investment in new data centers from Google that they've committed in 2022, which is Google has mentioned will create over 12,000 jobs and 600 million in data centers all the way around the U.S. and around the world. So the first ones, or at least the most recent ones, coming to us there in Dallas. So pretty exciting stuff about that. And I'm actually going to share some more when we get into the updates from the cloud providers as well about what's going on in that data center and its name and all those sorts of things. So stick around for that. Also in the news is more companies are as more companies are adopting multi-cloud strategies. That means that the costs are going up and up. Now, cloud costs are huge, folks. And what people are starting to realize is that when you are, first of all, understanding the cloud bills that you're getting from individual providers can actually be quite challenging. But once you have more than one cloud provider, and here's the little secret, everybody's got more than one cloud provider, how you're connecting those together and trying to make sense of it becomes extraordinarily challenging. Now, I've told you before, we don't sell Rackspace stuff here, but I will mention we've been working on solutions to help our customers be able to understand and have unified billing. But because that's one of the huge challenges is how do you, one, equate these bills and understand and correlate them. But the second piece is oftentimes those bills are coming into, and those resources across multiple clouds are coming into even the same departments inside of organizations. So what's needed is a way to mature your cloud bill understanding, to get unified view of that and be able to do chargebacks if you're not already doing that. So that article goes in and talks about ways to go about that. And so it's one of the huge challenges. How are you guys solving for unified billing across your cloud providers? Put it in the chat down below. Is that a pain point for you? If it's not, it certainly is going to be. Good morning, Megan. I'm glad you're here from San Antonio. All right, with that, we are going to move into the section where I'll tell you about some new updates from the cloud providers themselves. Now, one of these, I always start with AWS, we then go to Azure, then we head on down to Google. So I chose the one from AWS today because it was a completely new way of approaching service catalogs. Hey, Budapest is here. I don't know if I've ever had anybody here from Budapest. I'm so glad that you're here. Welcome. We're here every Tuesday and sometimes on Thursday as well. Oh, we have Oxford. I love Oxford. It's beautiful there. All right, sorry, distraction. A little ADD this morning. The coffee certainly helped. So let's talk about AWS. AWS now has a service catalog that has support for, now everybody's had support for role-based access. It's in fact, it's key to being able to secure your environment, your service catalogs, your compute environment, your storage, all of those things. And that means basically, if it's role-based access, what is your role in the organization? You create policies for those roles, and then you apply it to certain aspects. So if I were coming in and I'm a junior admin, I'm only going to have access to certain areas. Or if I'm in one specific department, maybe I'm in shipping and receiving, I'm not going to have access to what another department's going to see. That's role-based access. Well, now we have attribute-based access, and that it gives you as the organization the ability to assign attributes to aspects of your compute. In this case, it's the service catalog, and then only certain people are going to be able to see those items to add. So in the service catalog, again, if I'm in one department, maybe I can't spin up a giant Hadoop cluster because I don't necessarily have those rights. So attribute-based access, that's ABAC, a new acronym for you to learn. There will be a test later. Cool. Let's move on to Azure. So new from Azure, general availability. Azure Databricks is available in some new regions. Now, Azure Databricks, of course, it's the analytical environment. It allows you to get in and apply some deep insights utilizing Databricks SQL, Databricks data science and engineering, as well as machine learning. Well, it's available in some new regions. Those regions are Sweden Central US, or West Central US. And of course, you can find more information over at, if you go look at, what do I usually do? Azure Space Updates. You'll find it. Just do a Google. You're going to find those available out there. So Azure Databricks now available in more regions. Again, I mention this almost every time there's a new service available somewhere, and that is the fact that these cloud providers are spending so much time not just creating new capabilities, but expanding those capabilities. Speaking of expanding capabilities, lastly is Google. I mentioned earlier they just opened the data center in Dallas. And so that name is, oh, where did it go? I have it here. It's US West 1? No. Where did it go? Oh, there it is. US South 1. That's right. Dallas, Texas is now US South 1. And they have launched all sorts of services there. They've got Cloud Key. They've got Cloud Run. They've got SQL, MySQL, SQL and PostgreSQL, Cloud SQL for SQL Server, Cloud Spanner, VPN, Compute Engine, Data Flow. All capabilities they have launched inside of that data center. And of course, you can watch for more to be released there. Not part of this, but if you're paying attention to the AI world, I would encourage you to go read. I did this during dinner last night. Again, I'm traveling, so I wasn't sitting with my family reading articles. But if you go search, there's somebody who works inside of Google's ethical AI, and he's making some interesting claims about one of the AIs they have running there called Lambda. And it's a very interesting read if you have time for that. All right, lastly, again, we don't sell anything here on Cloud Talk Live, except for maybe the opportunity for you to come work with me. So one of the jobs I want to talk to you about is a cloud architect in our AWS professional services team. Now, as a cloud architect, you'll be technically focused, but also need to understand business planning. Remember, architects create a design for a solution that marry up to the business opportunity or challenges and solve them through the use of not just technology, but sometimes some business re-engineering as well, which is why it's important to have strong technical capabilities as well as business capabilities. You'll be the technical liaison, primary technical liaison between customers and engineering resources, provide tactical scope and work directly with the business and representatives and customers to understand the requirements and create solutions good, not only in the short term, but in the long term. If you're interested in checking out that job or any of the other ones we have here at Rackspace, and we're hiring like mad, just go over to rackspace.jobs and check that out. Well, folks, thank you so much for spending this half hour with us here this morning. A huge thank you to Simon Bennett for taking time out of his day to talk to us about public sector and cloud transformation. Hope you found that as insightful as I did. Now, next week, we have a great program scheduled for you as well. Inside of Rackspace, we have what are called Rackspace Racker resource groups, RRGs we call them. And depending on different types of communities or groups inside of Rackspace, they get to form. There's resources that Rackspace makes available in the form of some funds, as well as all sorts of other things. Well, in honor of Pride Month, we're bringing in our Pride group, and they're going to share how that group has how RRG has impacted them and their community. So I hope you'll be here next Tuesday for that program. Everyone, have an amazing rest of your day. And until next time, I'm Jeff DeVerter. I'm your host and the Chief Technology Evangelist here at Rackspace. Have an amazing day.